I'm Eleanor,
And I'm Lisa.
and we are the founders of the organization What's Your Grief? We are primarily a website and online community where we have hundreds of free articles and resources all about understanding grief and coping with life after loss. Thank you so much for having us today to talk to you for the next few minutes. Something I want to share with you about Lisa and myself is that we met working at the donor program in the state of Maryland, where we each worked for many years providing support to donor families. We also shared in common that we had experienced personal loss in early adulthood. Both our professional work and our personal experiences really inform the work that we do through What's Your Grief. A big topic that we cover at What's Your Grief is coping with holidays and special days, which is what we want to take a few minutes to talk to you about today. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Lisa to start our program.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with all of you. And this is a topic that I think we have been thinking about and talking about in so many ways over all of our career and our personal experience with grief and loss, but it feels especially important this year in 2020, where there are so many things that are affecting all of us. So we're going to spend a few minutes kind of thinking through what we may be able to do to make the holiday season just a little bit easier this year, knowing that no matter what, the first year after a loss, the second year after a loss are often incredibly challenging times. And we know that no matter how much planning, no matter how much we talk about this, that there's always going to be a lot of challenges that you all face. We want to start not by telling you that the holidays are difficult, because we know that you already know that. You're probably already feeling that as you look towards the holidays coming up. But we want to spend a few minutes thinking about why the holidays can be so particularly hard after a loss, because we know every day is difficult after a loss. But when we understand and think about the holidays a little bit more, it can make it a little bit easier for us to think about the things that we need to prepare for. And one of the things about holidays that we know are so difficult is that in our minds, we have such specific and distinct memories about the holiday season. We oftentimes remember exactly where we were on past holidays. We can think about the foods we ate. We know exactly who was with us. We can think of everyone who was sitting around that table. And so when we face a new holiday coming up or a new holiday season coming up, we're often particularly aware of the changes that have happened. We're so aware of maybe the empty seat or the empty seats around that holiday table, or we're thinking about the traditions that we had in the past that have had to change or maybe can't happen the way that they did before. And so suddenly our loss seems to intensify a little bit at specific times of year. We also know that the holiday season is a time where people sometimes feel like they're supposed to be happy. It's a time that's supposed to be maybe filled with cheer and family. And we see, all of these different things in the media and on social media. They're sending us messages that we're supposed to be feeling a certain way. And sometimes the feelings that we're feeling don't match up with the feelings we feel like we're supposed to be feeling. So part of today is going to be thinking about how we plan for the holidays. And part of today is going to be us encouraging you to have a little bit of self-compassion and know that it's normal and okay that the holiday seasons after a loss always become a little bit bittersweet, and to give yourself permission to be able to feel the difficult things about this holiday season, but also create space for some of the many wonderful things that will hopefully be part of your holiday as well. And so I'll turn back over to Eleanor to talk a little more about that.
So, what does it mean to cope with grief at the holidays? The answer to this is really going to be very unique to the individual and to the individual's family. How you cope with grief, how you cope with things like hard days, reminders, the holidays, it's really going to be tailored specifically to your strengths, your preferences, your resources. There are so many different ways to cope with hardship. That said, there is one recommendation that we always make to people who are facing a difficult day, something that they know is going to bring up grief, and that is to plan ahead. quite often what people will do is they say to themselves, I can't even think about it. I have to just put one foot in front of the other. I will deal with it when I get there. And what we find is that quite often when we do that, especially around the bigger holidays, we find that we're really caught off guard by some of the challenges that present themselves on that day, maybe leading up to that day or even afterwards. Where when it comes to things like tradition, filling roles, our relationships with other people. So we do encourage people to plan ahead to the extent that they can. With that, though, we also encourage people to remain pretty flexible because what we know about grief is that it can be really unpredictable. Sometimes you think, okay, I've thought of everything and I know the things that are going to be hard about this day. And then something totally unexpected catches you off guard. Maybe it's a song that comes on the radio. Maybe it's a decoration that you pull out of the box and brings back a flood of memories. So we want people to try and plan ahead, but also know that we're going to have those moments and we have to try and be flexible. And the best laid plans, right, they don't always work out. And so we also want people to know that, look, the holiday is not going to be perfect this year. And I'll give you two reasons why. One, you're grieving the death of a loved one. And two, COVID has made the holidays far from perfect. And so we just have to find our ways to get through it. So we have a step-by-step plan here. 7 steps. It seems pretty simple. Of course, it's not even nearly that simple, but we do think that these are some important things for people to think about as they're heading into the holidays. The first thing that we want people to do is think about who are we going to spend the holidays with. Now, this question for the last 5 years might have been pretty obvious. Maybe you always spend the holidays with the same people, but this year the answer might be a little bit different. If you're like me, you're not even really sure who you're going to spend the holidays with yet. So maybe take a moment to think about what are the possibilities. Who are the people I want to start touching base with about what we're going to do and how we're going to recognize the holidays. At the very least, if you're living with a number of people in a nuclear family under the same roof, those are the people you may want to talk to about what your plans are going to be. Start there and then maybe expand outward to the other rings of people who you may be around. But if you're going to just talk to the people you live with, maybe call a family meeting, maybe have a plan to sit down over dinner and discuss a few of the things. If it's people outside of your household that you're going to be spending time with, we all have gotten really familiar with the different virtual ways to connect. So call a Zoom meeting, plan to get on, a group text, whatever it is that makes the most sense for your family.
One of the next things that you're going to want to do with your family is consider the many different roles and responsibilities that are part of any holiday happening. In many cases, when we've lost a loved one, that individual was responsible for many different parts of the way that that day came together. And it'll be important to think about what some of the roles and responsibilities that your loved one played were and who might take on some of those roles. No one person likely is going to be able to fill the space that your loved one occupied in your holiday. But this meeting together can be a good opportunity to think about who may pick up a little bit of, one piece of what that person did. Someone else might pick up something else that that person did that was part of the holiday. And remember that some of those things may not even be tangible things. Some of those things might just be, that your loved one's presence during that holiday season. That's not something anyone's going to be able to fill. But it's a space where each person can go around and maybe think a little bit about what they would like to pick up as their part in filling that role or that space that your loved one has left empty.
Yeah, and the reason why we want people to be having these conversations as a group is to make sure to check in with people about how do you feel about filling that role. Sometimes when it's a loved one who died, when it's their roles that a person has to fill, that can be a very emotional experience. And so checking in to make sure people are good with filling certain roles, to make sure roles aren't all falling on one person, and then to say, you know what, if this turns out to be a little harder than you expected, like, let me know, tell me how I can support you. Or even rather than waiting for them to tell you, say, you know what, you're going to cook the dish. Let me go out and buy all the ingredients for that to be a support to you. So making sure to have that dialogue. Going along with roles and responsibilities, is to think about tradition. So within tradition, there are a lot of different roles and responsibilities, and that's why we think these two things go together. For a number of reasons, traditions have to change after a loved one dies. Some of them don't necessarily have to change, but they don't feel quite right without your loved one. And so we encourage people to think about which traditions were most important, are most important to us, which are the ones that really stick out. And I think what you'll find when you talk to family is that everybody has a different idea about what traditions really felt the most important to them, or really feel the most important to them. And so checking in and talking about which traditions are we wanting to keep the same. Maybe we know that they'll feel a little bit different, but we still want to do them the same that we always have. Which traditions do we need to change a little bit? Maybe because our loved one was a part of those traditions, maybe because COVID is impacting them. So which ones do we have to change? We still want to do them, but we know they're going to have to be a little bit different. And which ones are we maybe going to say, you know what, let's take a break from that tradition for this year, or maybe and maybe next year we'll come back to it. Maybe we'll never come back to it, but this year it doesn't feel right. And so really, even if you have to make a list, going one by one and looking at that, and the ones that you're going to keep and the ones that you're going to maybe modify slightly, then again, going through that idea of who's going to fill certain roles, who's going to be the one to sort of see these traditions through, what are we going to do as a family to uphold these traditions.
And with that, I think another piece that can be really important in these conversations and thinking about all of this is our next point, which is communicating with kids. And for kids, it's going to be important that they have thought about in advance and understood some of the ways that the holiday is going to look the same and some of the ways that the holiday is going to look different. For kids, they are often still very excited about the holiday despite the incredible grief and loss that they're feeling. And one of the things that's important is to give kids permission to feel all of the feelings that they will feel on the holidays. So to give them permission to feel excited and happy and those wonderful, joyful things they'll feel in the holiday season, but also to acknowledge that there will be moments that will be sad and that they may feel some of that coming up, and let them know that it's okay for them to express that sadness if they're feeling it. And you may also want to just have a little plan in place for if they get sad or overwhelmed or something is triggering, for them to be able to let you know, so that they can go take a break, so that they can have sort of somewhere they can go, something that they can do that can give them the space that they need. But you know the kids in your life best, so just think about what you think might be the most helpful for them to allow them to feel comfortable.
And I think including them in this family conversation can be really helpful, because then it doesn't feel like it's this big, deep, serious conversation one-on-one necessarily. It feels like it's a community conversation where we're all giving our input, and all of our input is valid. And so I think it can be really beneficial to include kids in that conversation. Other ways to have these conversations is of course a direct one-on-one conversation, if that feels like the right way to connect, or through even maybe some creative activities that you can do that will help to start a dialogue and start people talking about what might be hard about the holidays. And we can share some of those. We can find a way to share some of our ideas, or you can head over to our website where we have a lot of different activities around the holidays to complete with kids. Lisa mentioned giving kids permission to feel moments of joy and happiness, and we want to take that a step further and ask you to also give yourself permission to experience joy. Quite often, we feel like if we are having a moment of laughter, of joy, of singing, of gratitude, that it takes away from our grief, and it means that we're not still focused on our loved one, we're not still sad. And we want everybody to remember that we can experience a lot of different things at one time. And just because you have a moment where you do feel that joy, it doesn't mean that you're not still grieving very, very intensely for your loved one. And so we know that the holidays can be stressful. There's so much grief and loss around the holidays when we're missing people that we love, but there can also be moments of purpose and meaning and fulfillment and joy. And so we do encourage you to take a moment to recognize those when they happen. And this goes under that number 6 bullet point there about thinking about self-care. And we use the word self-care. We also talk a lot about just maintaining your well-being. Basically, we just want you to do two things. First, think about the things that you can proactively do to take care of yourself, maybe making sure that you have a half hour to go on your daily walk, maybe making sure that you have some time to do your reading if that's what you like to do in the evenings, or spending time journaling, making time to see your therapist if you haven't seen them in a while. Whatever it is that's coping for you, making sure you do some of that stuff, because if we can maintain that baseline, then we can help ourselves to sort of stay balanced a little bit and not get to a place where we feel like we are overly stressed and about to kind of lose it. But we may still get to that point because we're grieving and the holidays are tough, and 2020 is really tough. So also the second thing we encourage you to do is think about how will you cope when the moments do get tough, especially if it is a moment where you're gathering with other people. How will you maybe find a way to take a break and find an excuse to slip out, and what are the different things that you can do when you are feeling overwhelmed and really, really stressed out. So think ahead about those different coping mechanisms and have them in your toolbox and ready to go as you head into the holiday season.
And our final point is to think about ways that you can connect with your loved one and sort of include your loved one's memory in the holiday. And in many ways, already things that we've talked about will be ways that you will do that. Some of those traditions that your loved one has been part of, some of those roles and responsibilities that you're picking up will be things that you may talk about as a family, as ways that you're staying connected with your loved one. But we also want to think just a little bit more about how we can keep some of those connections going, especially in a holiday season that may feel completely upended and different than ever. So there's two things that we kind of want to end on as we think about those connections to our loved ones. And the first one is we really want to think as we go into the holiday season, and this holiday season, it may look very different, about the values that have always been at the center of the holidays and that your loved one was probably deeply tied to in part of your holiday memories and holiday traditions. And values can be this incredible guide for us when everything else feels upended and we feel like we don't have a kind of map to help us know what this holiday is going to look like. We can use our values as a family to really ground us and think about what are we going to do this year that connects us with those values that have always been there, that have always been part of our holiday, that were deeply part of our connection with our loved one who's gone. We may have to change the way it looks, but we're still going to make sure that that value is part of our holiday. So there are so many, there's just a few up here on the screen that are sometimes common ones for these winter holiday seasons, but thinking together as your family and making a list and saying, what are some of these things? And knowing that some are going to be hard, right? So for your family, consider those values and consider where you may be able to get creative this year.
And this is something to, as you're going through traditions, also to keep in mind. So often with tradition, because it's always done the same way, we think that it's about the what we do. And when traditions have to change, something that we often recommend to people is to strip away focusing on the what and actually think about the why. Why do we do this tradition? Is it because it connects us to our faith? Is it because it connects us to our family? Is it because it connects us to a different sense of purpose? And when we can figure out what that why is, we can remind ourselves that as long as we hold steady on that why, it's okay if some of the what's change. And we can always go back to doing it the way it was before, but if we can change, if we have to change some of these what's, it's okay as long as we focus, as long as we still continue to honor that why, honor that greater purpose. And so values, I think if you also think about them in the context of tradition and religion, they can be very, very useful as sort of a compass to guide us in whatever direction we need to go.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm a high school science teacher. I'm a high school coach. I coach baseball and softball and science Olympiad. So early spring, I blew out my knee hitting fly balls to the outfielders. The grass was too young and slipped out, and my patella tendon snapped, and I went down. And so after that happened, I had to pop it back into place and had to wait for surgery. Thankful that I had a donor that was able to give me a tendon and be able to make it so I could walk again and get back onto the field coaching like I was before. I am very thankful for my donors' gift to me to be able to carry on normal life activities, from playing with my girls to coaching and just being a normal, moving adult.
Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day. Unseen, unheard, but always near. Still loved, still missed, and very dear. Wishing you hope for the holidays in the midst of your sorrow, and offering you comfort in the midst of grief, both today and tomorrow.
We've had another very successful year. So, after all that hard work, it's time to start preparations for next Christmas. What in the name of Sam Hill is that?
Little Buddy Diapers.
His name is Buddy. He must have snuck into your sack at the orphanage. What do we do?
So, Santa had a decision to make. Fortunately, when it comes to babies, Santa's a pushover. So Buddy stayed with an older elf who had always wanted a child, but had been so committed to building toys, he had forgotten to settle down. Santa! Yes, I raised Buddy. I was his adopted father. Though Buddy grew twice as fast, he wasn't any different from the other children.
Not too fast, Buddy.
I mean, not really.
Now, before we learn how to build the latest in extreme graphic chipset processors, let's recite the code of the elves, shall we? Number 1.
Treat every day like Christmas.
Number 2.
There's room for everyone on the nice list.
Number 3.
The best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear.